Hi people, it's me again, Marino Ravenberg. In this video, I'll simply be discussing really quick. I'll be discussing the concept of power and how power corrupts men, specifically weak men, and how you can prevent it from happening you if you are someone that finds himself or herself in that position, and 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 or if you might ever find yourself in such a position where you inherit or receive or earn a tremendous amount of power and it all goes to your head, hypothetically speaking. And of course, by men, I also mean women. By men, I simply mean mankind as a whole. People are familiar with the saying power corrupts men. I don't know exactly if it's power corrupts men or power corrupts all men, but for the latter, it's not true, of course. Specifically, to be as accurate as possible, power corrupts weak men. Okay, weak men are easily swayed and therefore are prone to being corrupted by power to the point where what little morals and standards they had immediately goes out the door and or out the window. So, an example of someone being corrupted by power is someone that has lived on a shoestring budget, for example, someone that has had to make do with as little as possible. And then all of a sudden the person wins the lottery. This is the simplest of examples. Imagine some hillbilly living in the outback that made maybe like $200 a month. Just so to speak, just hypothetically speaking. And then that guy wins the jackpot lottery, you name it. And basically receives 10 million in funds. And that's where his character comes into play, okay? A lot of people are weak when it comes to stuff like this. They can't handle that level of power. You can imagine someone like him, okay, he's used to living off of as little as possible, coming into contact with such a vast amount of wealth in this context equaling power, will automatically usually make guys like these go nuts, bluntly put ape shit. It'll make them lose their minds to the point where the guy will spend money on things that he doesn't even need. And I've seen this in real life, by the way, mind you. Not literally a hillbilly, but I've seen people do this in real life. And you might wonder what factors contribute to someone being like that in general. Okay, because these people have basic characteristics. Let's just say weak men have basic characteristics. In general, mind you, there are exceptions. They're usually the unintellectual types. They're just your run-of-the-mill types that aren't really knowledgeable on the world as a whole. They're more the type that lives day to day, so primitive, simplistic. Those are the phrases that come to mind, or keywords that come to mind. Secondly, they're usually also uneducated, and yeah, that's pretty much it. There is no tertiary point. Those are the kinds of people that you can expect to display weak behavior. It simply corrupts them. You can look everywhere and you'll find corruption everywhere. Within everywhere where there's power for the taking, you'll find corrupt men. Okay, usually because these men are weak. No man that is of a strong character will allow himself to be corrupted by power like that. I'm not saying that it can't happen to one or two of the best of us, but again, all it takes is one moment of weakness. And yeah, in real life, situations that I've come into contact with where people are corrupted by power is for example, people that, like I said, these people are uneducated hicks, and they manage to find or obtain a way to make a lot of money. And instead of actually spending their money wisely, they buy stupid crap that they don't need. Okay, an example that I can give you is, for example, a family of 4 living in a 20 square meter apartment. Can you imagine that? 4 people living in a 20 square meter apartment, and basically the breadwinner of the household was a prospector. And the guy mined a lot of gold, found a lot of riches in the soil that he could sell off. And what do they do with the money? Instead of buying an actual house to improve their living standards, the woman of the household buys a treadmill, and the man of the household buys some fancy ass car that of course he cannot maintain in the long term. The woman only uses the treadmill twice or 3 times, and then she never uses it again. Instead of going to a gym where you have a treadmill that you can simply use temporarily. But see, perfect example. Now, by the way, this video is not going to be long, of course, because there's not a lot to say. How do you avoid yourself from being corrupted by power? Okay, so how do you make yourself strong if you are not already? You simply need to keep in mind that that nothing lasts forever. Okay, God's glory is the only thing that lasts forever. That is eternal. For the rest, nothing lasts forever, and that includes your power, whether it's newfound or whether you already have power. You name it. Bottom line is that in general, regardless of who you are, regardless of who you are, all it takes is for one or two things to go wrong, and you can go from riches to rags. We're talking about literally from being tremendously powerful in every sense of the word. I'm not just talking about wealth. I'm talking about being powerful overall, to literally ending up alongside the streets, so to speak. All it takes is for a couple of things to go wrong, one or two things to go wrong. In a realistic context, let's just say, if I had to list an example, is if you're someone that has a nice career, you're the CEO of some fancy smancy company, you have a house and everything, you're living on easy street, so to speak. All it takes for you to end up alongside the street is for your family to abandon you, for your house to burn down or similar, for you to lose your residence, and for you to lose your job. And guess what? You went from being high and mighty to low and wet. So yeah, in order to avoid yourself from that, that's the first point. Keep in mind that regardless of how much you've solidified yourself, okay, there is always that level or degree of unpredictability. Okay, as in God is the one that rules all. Even if you don't believe in God, you can use the phrase or idiom, the universe, you name it. If there are atheists watching this, it doesn't matter. Bottom line is that power is also, just like all other things, regardless of how solid it is fragile. Even rocks and boulders, regardless of how massive they are and how strong and sturdy they are breakable. They are not unbreakable. So the same applies to anyone within a powerful position, more or less. The second thing, that's the first thing. The second thing that you need to keep in mind is that within life is just a temporary journey, and regardless of how much power you've amassed for yourself, it's not going to last forever. Okay, your power will not last forever. You won't be taking that power with you into the grave or beyond the grave. You won't be taking it with you to the grave, and beyond that, of course. Assuming that you strictly focused on the material aspects of power. The only things that you'll be taking with you beyond the grave are the things that have real value, immaterial value, such as morals and values and overall God's grace, or God's grace overall. And yeah. And the only other point that comes to mind is that you also need to practice control of your senses. Don't be a slave to your emotions. That's one of the things that can easily corrupt all people. If you're someone, then honestly you're more close to being an animal, or akin to being an animal rather than a human being. Okay, you need to practice control of your senses and of your impulses. So if you, for example, want something to eat, your stomach should not automatically dictate that you eat. As in, you're in the middle of something and you need to prioritize, but your stomach is the one basically ruling your head, hypothetically speaking, and you simply need to eat in that moment, regardless of how busy you were, and regardless of the fact that whatever you were involved with and or in enjoyed priority at that juncture, at that moment in time, that specific moment in time. So yeah, you need to practice control of your base emotions at the very least, and of course beyond that, past that, you need to obtain and uphold morals and standards and general virtues. And regardless of how tempting or what kind of power degree you're faced with or you're tempted with, you should not give in. You should maintain your levels of standards and morals. Okay, otherwise your morals meant nothing. They were just as wobbly as a palm tree, for example. If you allow yourself to be seduced, okay, your morals and standards go right out the window or out the door. And any neutral bystander will say that, nah, the guy was just full of crap, he was full of shit, he just pretended to have morals and standards, but the second he was confronted with a hefty doses of power, it was too tempting for him. Don't be that way, okay? Don't be like that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. That's what you need to keep in mind, okay? You need to maintain morals and standards, realize that you won't be taking the material aspects of power to the grave with you. Only the immaterial aspects of power, so genuine virtue, that is what will last you an eternity until Judgment Day. And you should not be superficial, and of course practice control if you need to practice, if you don't have control already, at the very least over your base emotions and instincts. Don't allow your emotions and everything else to rule you. Okay, let rationale and logic prevail, and see to it that your morals and standards and virtues are not for sale, that they're not eclipsed by materialism as a whole. So yeah, that's all. Thanks for watching. Bye.